He returned home after a hard day at work and heard muffled sobs from the living room. Mary, my mother-in-law, who was temporarily living with us, was sitting on the couch, hugging her knees. In front of her stood an almost empty glass of red wine. "Mary, what happened?" I asked worriedly, sitting down beside her. She raised her tearful eyes to me. "Oh, Jack, it was a terrible date. That man turned out to be so boring and uninteresting. I don't even know where to begin." Mary had recently divorced after many years of marriage and decided to plunge into the world of dating again. This was her third failed experience in the last month. "Tell me everything in order," I gently suggested, pouring her some more wine, and she began to lay out the details of this sad meeting. Her potential suitor, Frank, immediately disappointed her with his lack of sense of humor and tactless remarks. Then he began to criticize her appearance, which of course was the last straw. "Can you imagine? He said that I wore too much makeup for a woman my age. How can one be so ill-mannered?" Mary was clearly devastated by this unpleasant experience. I tried to comfort her, assuring her that she was beautiful, intelligent, and would definitely find a worthy companion. "Thank you, dear. You are such a good son-in-law," she sighed, calming down a little. "I'm just so tired of all this searching." This is how our little tradition began. Frank conversations in the evenings about our lives, experiences, and dreams. Mary was more than just a mother-in-law to me. We became real friends and support for each other. Over the next few weeks, my conversations with Mary became more personal and trusting. We shared experiences that we usually hid from others. One evening, after a glass of wine, Mary told me about the difficulties in her marriage to my father-in-law, John. He was constantly working, often ignoring her needs. "At times I felt so lonely, Jack," she confessed with tears in her eyes. "John was a wonderful man, but he gave all his energy to work, forgetting about me." I took her hand in mine, trying to comfort her. Mary smiled gratefully through her tears. "What about you? How are things in your marriage to Sarah?" she asked quietly. I was silent for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Mary was the first person I decided to open up to. "To be honest, we have problems too. Sarah is too obsessed with her career and often doesn't notice me, and I notice other women," I said, ashamed of my confession. Mary squeezed my hand tighter, looking with sympathy and understanding. That evening something shifted in our relationship. We became closer, emotionally opening up to each other. The next few months, our closeness only intensified. In addition to personal conversations, we began to spend more time together, going to the movies, walking in the park, having dinner at restaurants. Mary became my closest friend and the person I could trust with my most intimate thoughts. I found peace and understanding in her company, which was so lacking in my marriage. Looking into her radiant eyes full of warmth, I could not help but admit that Mary was becoming something more to me than just a mother-in-law and confidant. My attraction to her grew with each passing day, and I did not know how to cope with it. Around the same time, Mary decided to try her luck again in finding a life partner. She registered on several dating sites and asked me to help create an attractive profile and select suitable men. At first, I felt a little awkward looking at potential suitors for my own mother-in-law. But soon we got so carried away with this process that we forgot about any conventions. In the evenings, we sat side by side on the couch, browsing profiles and photos of strangers. "Look, this David seems like an intelligent person," Mary said, pointing to the laptop screen. "A university professor interested in art. Yes, but look at how he's dressed in the photo, in plaid pants and a striped tie. It's terribly tasteless," I grumbled. Mary laughed cheerfully, and we moved on to the next profile, teasing each other and looking for funny profiles. Soon these evenings became a tradition that we both passionately looked forward to. There was no longer any tension or embarrassment. We felt completely at ease and comfortable in each other's company. One night, when we once again laughed at someone's ridiculous profile, Mary suddenly became serious again. "Jack, what if I never find that one person who will truly understand me?" She looked at me sadly. "What if this is all just a waste of time?" Holding my breath, I met her gaze. Something inside me clenched as I realized I was falling in love with this amazing woman. "You've already found him," I answered barely audibly, not looking away. A tense silence hung in the living room. Mary seemed to understand the meaning of my words and froze, studying my face. The air between us literally crackled with undisclosed emotions and meaningful pauses. Which one of us would be the first to break the line? Holding my breath, I looked into Mary's deep brown eyes, trying to read her thoughts. Her pupils dilated, her lips slightly parted. The tension between us was becoming almost palpable. And suddenly, without expecting it herself, Mary took a decisive step forward and clung to me in a passionate kiss. I froze for a moment, stunned by her impulse, but then hugged her tightly, responding to the kiss. All moral principles, all common sense, everything flew out of my head, giving way to an all-consuming desire. My hands roamed Mary's body, caressing her luxurious curves. She moaned softly, running her fingers through my hair. After a few minutes of this mad rush of passion, we broke away from each other, breathing heavily. Mary looked at me with wide eyes, her cheeks burning. "Oh God, what have we done?" she exhaled, covering her face with her hands. I pulled her to me and wrapped her in a tight embrace, covering her neck with kisses. "We can't hide it anymore, Mary. I want you. I want all of you." She pulled away, looking at me with concern. "But Sarah, your wife, my daughter. This is wrong, Jack." I put a finger on her lips, urging her to be silent. "Forget the rules. Don't you feel it? This incredible attraction between us?" Without letting her answer, I plunged into her mouth with a greedy kiss again, and Mary, soon responding, finally succumbed to our forbidden attraction. The rest of the night merged into a kaleidoscope of embraces, kisses, and hoarse moans. We engaged in passionate, wild intimacy right there on that couch, forgetting about everything in the world. At dawn, when the first rays of the sun broke through the curtains, I woke up in our guest bedroom next to the sweetly snoring Mary. Her tousled hair was scattered across the pillow, and her body was covered only by a thin robe. She looked so peaceful and beautiful. I hope my wife didn't notice my absence from our bed. I felt a surge of tenderness for this woman who had given me an unforgettable night. But at the same time, horror and guilt were growing inside me. What have I done? How will I look Sarah in the eye after this betrayal? Carefully, trying not to wake Mary, I got out of her embrace and quickly got dressed. Taking one last look at her serene face, I left the house, immersed in confusion and anxiety. Thankfully, everyone else was asleep. After that fateful night with Mary, I began to treat her completely differently. The guilt I felt over our intimate connection made me avoid her company. When we accidentally found ourselves alone, I tried to behave as detached and dry as possible, keeping silent or getting by with monosyllabic phrases. All our former soulful conversations, unrestrained laughter and jokes, all that was left in the past. Mary reacted painfully to my cold behavior. I saw how her beautiful eyes filled with tears in moments of my indifference. Sometimes she tried to strike up a conversation, but I invariably cut her off. "Jack, what's happening to you?" Mary asked in desperation. "Why are you treating me like this lately?" I just looked away, not finding the strength to confess the shame and inner struggle I was experiencing. How could I tell her that after that unforgettable night, everything had changed? That now, just one look at her fills me with a mixture of lust and fear of exposure. A tense atmosphere reigned at home. Sarah, my wife, clearly sensed the changes in me, but did not dare to ask directly. At night, I tossed and turned in bed without sleep, stunned by what had happened with Mary, and feverishly thinking about what to do next. The thought of revealing the whole truth to Sarah terrified me. I was not ready for the destruction of our marriage. But at the same time, my feelings for Mary did not disappear. With each meeting, I barely restrained the urge to possess her again. It seemed that life had gotten out of control, and the future had never been so foggy. The agonizing struggle between guilt and lust, family and forbidden desires was driving me crazy. I was drifting in the open sea of contradictions without a map or compass, and I saw no shore in sight. The next few months were a real hell for me. I spent all my free time trying to push away the memories of the passionate night with Mary, but the harder I tried, the more obsessive they became. I noticed the slightest details that reminded me of that unforgettable intimacy: the mole on her shoulder, the curve of her hip, the sparkle in her eyes. Every time I saw Mary, I felt a rush of heat. I could barely restrain myself from pulling her to me for a greedy kiss. At the same time, Guilt was gnawing at me from the inside. I betrayed the trust of Sarah, my beloved wife with whom I had lived for many years. Her love and devotion, and all this I trampled in one stormy night. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I would wake up from nightmares where Sarah found out about my infidelity and looked at me with pain and disappointment. These dreams made me break out in a cold sweat. I could not allow my mistake to destroy our family. But the more I tried to avoid and ignore Mary, the stronger my attraction to her became. At times it reached an unbearable degree, so much so that I thought I would go crazy. In such moments I would drop everything and leave the house under a plausible pretext. Finding myself alone, I allowed the memories to overwhelm me. The taste of her kisses, the touch of her body, the sweet moans. Giving free rein to my imagination, I experienced sweet relief. And again I would return home, tired, empty, with a deep sense of shame. But not for long, because soon the agony would repeat itself. It was madness, a vicious circle of the struggle between sin and virtue, lust and repentance. I was torn between two women, loving both and fearing to lose them. Every day was filled with torment. Mary would try to get close again, then try to ignore me, hiding her suffering. At times it seemed to me that this could not go on. Sooner or later something had to be resolved, but how? And at what cost? This intermediate suspended state threatened to destroy everything that was dear to me. I was walking on a knife edge, keeping my balance with the last of my strength, and I knew that it would not last long. The situation reached a critical point one November evening. Sarah suddenly came home earlier than usual and found me alone with Mary. We were sitting on the couch, not touching each other, but there was an oppressive tension between us. "What's going on here?" Sarah asked, frowning. I felt a chill run down my spine. Had she guessed? Before I could squeeze out a lie, Mary abruptly got up and took a step toward her daughter-in-law. "Sarah, we need to discuss something. You'd better sit down." Her voice was firm, although her lips were trembling slightly. She uncertainly sat down in the armchair, looking at Mary questioningly. I silently watched, squeezing the armrest of the sofa until my fingers hurt. And then Mary blurted out, "Jack and I, we love each other. There was something more than just friendship between us." A deafening silence hung in the air, during which I only looked at the floor, not daring to look my wife in the eye. Sarah made no sound. "Now you know the truth," Mary continued, barely audibly. "I understand that this is terrible, but we both can't live like this anymore, in constant struggle and torment." Her voice broke into a sob. Sarah was still silent. "I love you, Sarah," I suddenly said, finally daring to look at my wife. "And at the same time, I love Mary too. I'm confused. I hate myself for what happened, but I can't deceive you anymore and live in eternal tension." Sarah shifted her gaze from me to her mother and back, her eyes filled with tears. How could you, Jack? After so many years of marriage?" she forced out through sobs. "And you, Mom, how could you betray me with my own husband?" Neither Mary nor I could find an answer. We just stood there, our heads bowed in repentance. Guilt gripped our hearts with lead vices. "I need to think it all over," Sarah said hollowly, standing up. "Don't you dare even come near me until I make a decision." And she left, slamming the door loudly. Mary and I were left alone, helplessly looking at each other. The question, "What's next?" hung in the air. A week passed, then another. Sarah ignored any of my attempts to talk, locking herself in the bedroom. The decision could fall at any moment. Parting with her, divorce, would be like death for me. But at the same time, I couldn't give up my feelings for Mary either. Our connection was inseparable, no matter how immoral it sounded. Would I stay with Sarah, breaking up with Mary and paying her with lies? Or would I choose the path with Mary, despite public condemnation and a break with my former family? Or would I be able to conceal both halves of myself, continuing to lie and wriggle? The choice was unbearably difficult, but I knew I had to finally say goodbye to the past and make a decision. And whatever it was, my life would never be the same again. What awaits me ahead? The torments of remorse, condemnation and loneliness, or perhaps enlightenment in a new life? I did not know the answer, but I was ready for any twist of fate. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.